For those of you who have been playing Jailbreak for a while, you may be familiar with Jailbreak's jetpack. Some of you may recall how often it was used by police and criminals alike, yet falling out of common use in recent years despite initial praise from its release. From a tool practically every player equipped back in 2019 to a terribly buggy burden, this video explores the jetpack's rise and fall. Timestamps have been provided for your convenience. The jetpack. Added in mid-2019 as a part of the Season 3 map expansion and jetpack update, the jetpack features a relatively cheap price of $50K. Most it's used to have two spawns, one on top of the now removed jetpack mountain, and another on top of the control tower in the old airport. This has since been reduced to a single desolate, barren spawn. Due to its sheer versatility, accessibility, and usefulness, its popularity skyrocketed. It was hard to find a player without a jetpack equipped. Whether a cop or a criminal, players could easily use the jetpack to escape cops, skip robberies, and flee danger by simply double-tapping the space bar. It was frequently used to skip the jewelry store obbies, escape the museum without having to disable security or pull the levers, access the passenger train, and easily access the old power plant control board prior to its revamp. It seemed to have a pretty rigid fan base with practical use and player benefit. So what led to its eventual, almost inevitable downfall? Downfall. The jetpack's downfall arrived in steps. Its death was imminent, inevitable, and expected. As players grew to use the jetpack, it became perhaps too relied upon. It was blatantly overpowered. Players could fly over obbies, completely avoid threats, essentially skipping the game. The first stage of the jetpack's downfall arrived when the jetpack was disabled in robberies. Though many complained and were heavily dissatisfied, the jetpack still had some value and practicality, since it could still be used to avoid cops, threats, danger, or traveling over obstacles outside of robberies. However, this nerve was later partially reserved. The jetpack was only disabled in the museum. But then came the fatal blow, the final nail in the coffin, completely making the jetpack obsolete. Players had a 15-second cooldown when refueling the jetpack, which required to be conducted on a solid ground. Furthermore, the jetpack could not be refueled when a near player from the opposite team. And finally, the jetpack ended up changing locations after the 2022 map expansion, which ultimately led to the jetpack becoming obsolete. It was simply not worth the additional trip, considering all the nerfs it had received, especially since Crater City was and still is pretty empty. Its bugginess and change in location made many players stop using it completely. While the jetpack still provides an undeniable advantage in combat, it has increasingly become less useful, not worth the additional trip or time. Conclusion. In conclusion, the jetpack is not completely obsolete, since it's the only tool of its category or type, but it definitely does not hold up as well as today as it previously did in 2019. Consequently, it's probably no longer recommended for starter players. On one hand, the jetpack was blatantly overpowered and partially obsoleted PvP. On the other hand, it is now significantly unpowered and is not practical whatsoever, perhaps only for the occasional emergency usage, assuming the jetpack is fully refueled before any dangerous encounters. Its lacking features are quite disappointing. I remember frequently using the jetpack back in the summer of 2019 when grinding and PvPing. I suppose now the question is, are these nerfs deserved or were they unnecessary?